So there are good reasons for higher education institutions to deal with the challenge of strategic planning and strategic planning processes. From your experience, what are the most crucial success factors in these strategic planning processes?
Well, I think there's a lot. The question is where we start, really. One point, I think, is that the plan should be real rather than just paper exercises. There's a little bit of a tendency to produce plans for external consumption without the plans ever really affecting what goes on inside the institution. So they need to be real plans, and by that I mean the plans would have to be connected up, both vertically and horizontally in the way in which I just talked. The plans to be real would have to have consequences. If you made a plan to do something and you did it, well, that's a consequence. That's fine. That's good. The question is whether you did it properly or whether you did it effectively. So that raises another discussion about the efficiency of how things were done. But also, I think there should be consequences if something doesn't happen. And because an institution needs to learn about itself and why it is apparently incapable of achieving what it said it was going to achieve. So that would seem to mean that one of the crucial success factors in any planning process has really got to be effective monitoring, effective evaluation of results, and then a recycling of objectives to take account of new circumstances and also to take account of things which maybe haven't been done as they probably ought to have been before. I think a second factor, I suppose, in the success of our plans is that they ought to be sufficiently comprehensive. They ought to cover the whole range of institutional activities, not just settle on one or two small parts of it. So they ought to be comprehensive, and they ought to be quite integrated in the sense that if there's something being done or proposed to be done on an academic side, then there are the resources to back it up. Then you've got the human resources who are capable of delivering it, and so on. So things, for example, like staff recruitment, staff development, need obviously to be aligned, with the purposes of the institution in that way. A third element, I guess, is that a plan really ought to start from a diagnosis of where the institution actually is in order to establish that which it's good at, in order to establish any weaknesses or problems, in order to establish any external opportunities or challenges which need to be confronted. So there should be quite a strong diagnostic element at the beginning of the plan. It's no good really sitting down and saying, well, let's have a few objectives and pluck them out of the air. I mean, it's really got to start from a quite an accurate diagnosis of where the institution is. And to that extent, it's pretty important to have an accurate and up-to-date database. Because if you were doing any sort of diagnosis, universities being what they are, faculties may tend to have one picture of how well they are doing. The university, on the other hand, may have quite a different picture of how they're going. And the only way you can actually resolve that is by having good data, not only in terms of present performance and past performance, but also data in terms of future projections of environmental trends, of the student market, of public sector finance, the market, and various other things of that particular type.
This sounds quite challenging in face of loosely coupled, fragmented higher education institutions.
That's right. That's
right. What's your experience? There are probably more mistakes in those processes than...
lot of mistakes, which would be failure to do the sort of things which I've been talking about. But also, I think a failure maybe by central units of the institution to pick up any of the issues which faculties and institutes are finding as they going forward in the plan. So, you know, for example, we might have a strategic plan for a faculty which is in a pretty bad condition. You know, academically it may be not very good quality, financially it may be a bit of a disaster area, you know, there's not many students and so on. Well, if that faculty is to produce a strategic plan which meets the university's priorities, then it's probably going to need a lot of help in doing it, in terms of things like new program development, help in getting research money, maybe help in shaking out you know, surplus numbers of staff and so forth, maybe help in getting international students and various other things like that. Because if you've got parts of the university which are not really performing very well, they really going to need some help, you know, from the centre in terms of figuring things out. So what that means, I guess, is that the central units of the university would have to have very much a culture which is based on support and help for the departments, rather than simply controlling them in an excessively bureaucratic way, you know, which is often, unfortunately, a characteristic of a lot of finance departments and human resource departments. They tend to be very bureaucratic rather than very helpful, and I think that's probably not sustainable if you've got a decent strategic planning process. And I think you know, as we've talking, we've sort of jumped, I suppose, between success factors in terms of actually managing and sustaining the plan on an ongoing basis, and factors in terms of setting up the plans in the first place. And I think the two of those are really quite relevant. In terms of setting it up, I think that's where the process of developing a strategic plan would really need to be quite transparent. There'd need to be a transparent timetable, there'd need to be a transparent structure, they need to be transparent in terms of how various individuals could make their contributions to the thinking and various other things of that type as well.